You know that quote everyone throws around about how we have enough clothes on the planet to clothe the next 6 generations? Well, it turns out we don't really technically know for sure if that's true. Like, we can't provide any actual data or statistics that this is possible. You wanna know why? It's because clothing companies don't need to disclose how much clothing they produce and discard. So we have 0 numbers to track this kind of stuff, which means it's probably way worse than we actually think it is. The last EPA report, released in 2018, calculated over 17 million tons of textile waste reported for that year. And it's pretty safe to assume that number has grown year over year. Meanwhile, in 2023, it's estimated the global fiber production reached 124 million tons. Now, again, I don't have the clear data to make this statement, but it sounds to me like we're throwing out the same amount we're bringing in each year. And if you have watched any of my fashion review videos, you know that the current state of fashion is, it's pretty bad. We're not making that great of stuff. So that's why today we're gonna go thrifting. Sometimes I just need a little bit of a good old palette cleanser thrift trip to remind myself what good quality clothing actually looks like. And obviously with those statistics, it's a really motivating reminder as to why thrifting is so important. It's not actually gonna solve all of our problems. In fact, it's just a bit of a band-aid on a broken system that we currently have in place. But we do have so much good quality clothing already in rotation, and it's so important that it doesn't end up contributing to that 17 million tons of textile waste number that I talked about in the beginning. Because yeah, the current stuff that's in rotation doesn't actually count for that 17 million tons of textile waste, which is just... Personally, I have spent years building my thrifted wardrobe brick by brick, and honestly, I'm pretty dang proud of it. But I've also honed in a bit of a method to my madness, so using my recent thrift finds, I'm gonna walk you through it all. So without further ado, let's go thrifting. The thrift store can be such an overwhelming experience when you're new to thrifting. It can easily start to feel like a pile of unwanted clothing and garbage if you're in kind of the wrong mindset. But knowing how to rifle through it all and kind of find the gold is, in my opinion, an unmatched skill set to have. As a lot of you already know, I am a bit of a fanatic when it comes to wool. I can always place the value of an item based on that. But one symbol that is always a quick hello, this is good stuff, is the wool mark symbol. In the 1930s, a bunch of wool growers got together and created the International Wool Secretariat.
This festival was organized by the International Wool Secretariat and is the first time individual countries have sent their own mannequins to such an event,
with the goal of getting the word out on how awesome wool is. By the early 60s, a lot of wool farmers saw the writing on the wall with synthetics and knew it was slowly taking over the industry and confusing a lot of consumers.
The material soiled easily. Cleaning was a problem. But now, look what's happened to the parlor. It's become a living room in the true sense of the word. A room for the whole family. Take the fabrics, for instance. The fibers they're made from didn't exist in the days of the old family parlor. But ever since chemists developed them, they've been doing a lot to change our way of living.
Say, didn't you just wash those curtains this morning?
Yes, but they're made with Dacron. That's why they dry so quickly. And I almost never iron them.
So they came up with the Woolmark logo as a way to show consumers they were getting 100% wool that met the benchmark and the standards they set. If anything now, you can see it as a mark of quality and good sourcing of materials. This casual corner skirt with the Woolmark symbol is a perfect example of intentional fabric sourcing and quality craftsmanship. And as we learned in my last thrifting video, it was a mall brand. So yet again, quality standards and the drastic swing in material use over the decades is a perfect example of the power of thrifting. Wool, cashmere, leather. That's a textured outfit right there. And I think that's why it works so well. I don't know, maybe it's a little like 2012 Tumblr girly. But honestly, I'll never not be 2012 Tumblr girly. Next up, if you are a fan of all the mainstream brands and that's all you're looking for at the thrift, let me take a minute to convince you to broaden your horizons. I talk about this all the time, but so many modern day brands are using vintage as a framework for design. And at this point, I don't need to tell you that vintage was done way better. You might be familiar now with the term dead stock. Brands like Reformation use it as a way to reuse overproduced fabrics and excess textiles from fabric mills. But it used to be a way to describe unsold merchandise, clothing that got left behind in a back room somewhere and never sold, old or new with tag items that were never touched and never worn. It's a really murky marketing term. In some cases, it's a great way to keep fabric that would have likely been incinerated and sent to the landfill in use and in circulation, but it's also a way for companies to continue making terrible quality fabric in excess. And it makes it really hard to know if those Reformation dead stock polyester pants came from the same mill that made the fabric for, let's say, H&M, because that's just how the global textile trade works now. Everything gets mixed in the same supply chain. On a side note though, I do want to say it's also a great way for sewists and small business owners to get their hands on high quality fabric. So it's not all bad. It's honestly very nuanced. But when you know these things, suddenly that vintage dress looks and feels so much better than modern day items. This dress is by the brand Starina, and although I couldn't find any concrete information on the brand, I will say between Starina and the brand Nostalgia, those are the two labels that I see the most over and over again that have that like rayon, you know, textured kind of flouncy style dresses. Every time I come across one, I'm like, oh, that's what Reformation's trying to do. That's why I'm just eternally excited whenever I find these styles at the thrift. These dresses are the exact blueprint brands like Reformation, Realization Par, Doan, Cezanne, they all use these to make their current designs and cuts. And trust me, it goes way deeper because these cuts were influenced originally by the 1930s, but like I only have so much time in one video, so we're not gonna unpack all that today. But that does help me segue into my next point and brings me to my next thrifted find, and how much it is so important to think ahead and knowing trends before they hit mainstream, or understanding how often trends and silhouettes come back around. It can give you a massive advantage in thrifting. Honestly, I used to do trend forecasting videos for this very purpose, not to encourage people to buy new items all the time, but more to dissect and analyze fashion through a historical lens. But lately, because I'm not leaning as much into thrifting for my content, I've hesitated a lot with how these types of videos might come off. Trends are fascinating to me from a historical context, but living in this current climate and production level, it just feels almost like perpetuating the problem. But trust me, watch a handful of runway shows or look through a designer's archives, and you will so quickly see how obvious it is that everything is constantly on repeat. And it always puts it into perspective how well-made clothes are timeless. Right now, the biggest trends are hourglass blazers, mock neck jackets, basically anything Ralph Lauren. Like, he's having quite possibly the biggest moment of his career. Also, I think it's like well known by now, but this is from the men's section, and don't ever skip on the men's section. They always have the best stuff over there. I am always drawn to anything with an ascot tie or a ruffled collar, and it is always, always, always a classic that comes back around for fall. The silk blouse is by the brand Jenny, and buckle up because it actually has some pretty noteworthy history, and most people probably would have left it behind. Jenny was started in the 1960s by Arnaldo and Donatella Girombelli. It was a pretty pricey Italian ready-to-wear brand. In 1973, they hired a young designer by the name of Gianni Versace. Yeah, that Versace. He was eventually named creative director and launched 2 additional lines under the brand named Byblos and Complice. Because of the success with these brands, he was able to eventually go on and launch his own brand, Versace. In 2001, Prada acquired Jenny and eventually the label closed down, but it was resurrected in 2011 under a different company, but it does stick pretty well to its roots and it is still very, very expensive. So tell me the next time you see any of those 3 brands in the thrift store, you're not gonna be stoked because you're essentially finding something that was under the influence, at least, by Versace. Okay, so you might be thinking, Laura, that's only 4 items. 4 items! I know, I'm just not honestly a big thrift haul person. I really never have been. When I shut down my vintage shop, I really started recognizing the clothes that made me happy. And maybe it's because I've been doing this for so long, but it's something that it's now a muscle memory for me when it comes to selecting what I want and what I know is high quality. It's a game of patience and understanding, and it takes time to grow a wardrobe. Trust me, you do not need bags and bags of clothes to craft the perfect outfit. In fact, I think for me, doing big hauls actually made my closet even more confusing. I was casting a net so wide that I didn't really let the clothes take time to marinate in my wardrobe. Like, the idea of a perfect wardrobe genuinely should not happen overnight. It's I like to say it's like a metaphor for life. It's the journey, not the destination. but really, truly give some of the junk that's already out there a chance, because so much of it is gonna have such a big impact on your wardrobe. Because a lot of it has some really, really cool, rich history and was possibly made by the designer Gianni Versace and you didn't even know it, or part of a campaign that started in the 1930s and is still a benchmark of quality today. Or better yet, you might find a dress that is 10 times better quality than that $300 dead stock dress the It Girl brands are selling. Ha, dang it, I love making these videos. They are my absolute favorite. They are so fun for me. They do take a little bit longer to make because sometimes actually, you know, finding the item and then finding the perfect like story, it has to be like a good, you know, it's gotta be a good day. These items were all thrifted over the course of 2 days. So if that puts into perspective, 4 items, 2 days, like, you know, it can take a while to build stuff, but I think that's the whole point. And also, if you're interested in that breakdown that I talked about the 6 generations worth of clothing, I've linked the news bit that I listened to find out all those numbers and everything. And just so you know, it should not stop anyone from using that as a quote. In fact, every year, I think we should just slap on another generation because that's essentially what we're equaling. So we're probably on 8 generations worth of clothing now at this point. So that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you're new around here, I might have a couple extra videos for you right here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.